Welcome to the GSD show. Today, we've got a guest who is the epitome of resilience and innovation, Dan Uyemera. From early entrepreneurial days to life-changing setbacks, Dan's been through it all. After pivoting from a career slump with a severance in hand, he leaped into the fitness world, revolutionizing gym software. And today, he is the CEO of PushPress, empowering gym owners with groundbreaking solutions. His journey is a blueprint in not just surviving, but thriving against all odds. Dan, welcome to the GSD show, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here speaking to you guys today.
Man, I'm so excited to talk with you. I've got a chance to learn a little bit more about you and what you've done in the industry, what you've done in your life. Pretty inspiring story. But before we get into that, I want to dive into some of the things we're going to be talking about today so the listeners have a good idea. One of them is you've learned how to drop churn down to about 1%. You found a way to get that there for the average gym, which keep in mind that's incredible. The average gym, fitness studio that's class-based has a churn of around 10 to 12%, at least as of the latest data that was dropped. However, the best in the industry are seeing between 3 to 6%. And you're saying you found a way to implement something that helps drop it down to as low as 1%. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. So what we did is we basically just poured through all the data and tried to figure out what the best gyms were doing. I will say this, we're looking at cohorted data, which means we're looking at slices of the customers to try and understand where the churn is coming from. And I give this whole keynote and I call it my North Star metric keynote. And I speak to this because we live in an industry where everyone's looking for a shiny object solution to their problem. They're looking for more leads. They're looking for new ways to sell customers. They're looking for new products to sell. They're looking for all these things. And we're kind of stepping over dollars to pick up pennies in my experience. And what we come to find was the best gyms, all they were doing was maximizing on attendance. They were making sure people showed up to the gym. We operate in a group-based class fitness model similar to your audience. So it was while they were looking in all these other directions for the solution, the answer was right within their own gym. It was the members that were already paying them. So yeah.
So I definitely want to dive into that. And by the way, I'm a big believer in that. I think a lot of people, I've made a lot of content on this over this last year even, but a lot of people hear marketing, they hear it as synonymous with like paid ads. And they think marketing is paid ads, when in reality, paid ads is like one tiny little piece of marketing. And what we believe here at loudrumor is you market to your best customers first, your best prospects second, and then everyone else after that. Because the last person you want to lose is the one you work so hard to get and you're so glad you signed. Yep. Right. And we want to keep those guys. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about leveraging NPS to provide value first and then profit to follow. So we're going to talk about that, what that actually is and why it's important. And honestly, Dan, I want to dive into your story. I've looked into you here. You've gone from rock bottom to $100 million inside of a decade, right? I mean, that's an incredible leap. And I'd love to be able to learn, what kind of lessons can we extract from that? What kind of takeaways can the audience be able to walk away with and say, like, dude, I can do this too, right? So would love to hear in that too. Is that okay?
Absolutely. It sounds fun. Let's do it.
All right, man. Well, let's start with the first one. You call it your North Star metrics, which was developing about 1 to 3 key metrics that drive the business forward. So what are the North Star metrics to you and that you use?
Yeah. So in order to actually develop this North Star metric concept, and I think the team that sent over this information to you fumbled on one thing. Your North Star metric is your one metric you're looking at, not 1 to 3. It is the one.
Okay.
And there's certain criteria you have to hit with the North Star metric. And the first one is it needs to express customer value. And I think that's one of the biggest things people miss when they think of like what their most important metric is. Because I ask gym owners all the time, what is the most important metric in your gym? And the answer I generally get back is revenue per member, average lifetime value of a customer, anything that has to do with revenue. And that fails the first part of this North Star metric test in that it has to be has to express customer value because your customer does not care how much money you make, right? The second criteria of a North Star metric is it needs to reflect the current business objective. Now, luckily for most gyms, current business objective is grow your gym. It's pretty simple. You're not going through different inflections of a business like a Toyota or a Ford might. So for the most part, with the exception of maybe for your first 3 months where you're trying to establish a gym base, you are always in the same business objective of trying to grow your gym. And the third most important component of a North Star metric is it has to reflect future success, not be a reflection of past success. So it has to be something, I call them drivers or inputs. It has to reflect the driver of success and not be a measurement of success itself. That makes sense. So again, revenue kind of fails that test because revenue is the actual thing you want to, that's the output that you want to achieve. And the input is what you're trying to figure out what you can drive. And the reason we want that as a North Star metric is because the North Star metric should be something you can actually take action on to change the trajectory or the direction of your output, right? So we're working with inputs and outputs.
Have you found that there can be more than one North Star metric option? Like, could one gym have one North Star metric, another one have another, in regards to the KPI definition itself, not necessarily the value of that KPI?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely possible. And it would be a reflection of your culture or what type of value you want to bring to your market, the type of client or customer that you have. It absolutely could be.
What are some examples? Like what's a North Star metric for PushPress right now? And then maybe what's a good North Star metric for maybe like a gym owner that you've recently worked with that you're like, okay, yeah, that's a great example, or maybe what you would do.
So I'll give you some examples of, I'll start with some other North Star metrics because my story is going to line on one point and I don't want to be repetitive too much. So let's say I'm running a weight loss clinic and my primary function and value to the market is to help people lose weight. My North Star metric might be pounds lost, just pounds lost. How many pounds I've taken off of people over time. If I was building a running studio or maybe a NCAA D1 training studio, my North Star metric might be number of kids I get scholarships for. Although that would be tough because the number would be pretty low, right? But it'd be something I definitely want to strive for. For my group fitness gym and similarly for PushPress, our North Star metric is check-ins. It's attendance to the gym. And to actually elaborate on that a little bit more, it's really engagement. So there's a lot of engagement points that aren't measured today that will be measured soon. We're working on that, and I'm sure a lot of other software companies are, but things like, leaving a Google review, commenting on your Facebook threads or being a part of your Facebook group, tracking a workout, attending the gym, text messaging your coach, things like this, right? These are all engagement points that could be tracked. And I think quite simply, engagement is the most important metric all these group fitness gyms have to track.
Would you measure that in a numerical way? Like, we want to have X number of engagements, or would you do a percentage? Like, we want to make sure that each gym has at least this percentage of members engaging at this level. Like, how would you with that metric?
Super good way of thinking about it. And I love that you're thinking this way because you've been in business for a while. You've already started to pick this apart. So we actually want to measure the North Star metric in pure raw numbers, because from there, you're automatically going to start to go, well, what does that look like per customer? What does that look like per coach? What does that look like per square foot? What does that look like in December versus November, right? You can start to slice that up in all these different ways. And that's how you start to identify trends and success of your business. So if you know, and let's just work with this assumption that a North Star metric is in check-ins. That's the simplest one. Number of times someone comes to your gym. If you know that when someone comes to your gym, they're more likely to be a member of your gym for longer, which means they're more likely to pay you more money and also stay a member longer. Then you can start to look at like, oh, what did I do with this one group of people who come to the gym 23 times a month versus this one group of people who come 3 times? They're the same type of people, but I did something different. What did I do? And this is the scientific approach that you can deploy in your gym or your business that can allow you to actually systematically grow based on scientific method, right? Hypothesis, test, analyze, and then double down on what's working and get away from what's not.
That's interesting. We're at loudrumor doing the same thing. We're starting to dissect our members based on engagement, but we didn't call it North Star or anything like that. We're really looking at how what's the percentage of usage and how much are certain things being used, and we're doing that for a few reasons. One, to determine, of all the things that we offer, like what could we not pay as much attention to? What should we double down on or find ways to even create a better version of? But also, how does that tie to churn within the business and also lifetime value, not just because of churn, but also because people are going to spend more with us. So we're actually just beginning the dissecting process of that now. We've realized that our best marketing strategy over the next quarter is going to be getting that churn down about 20%. If we can get that down, that's incredible for us, right? But it also, like I think what you had mentioned, it ties, because the only way we're going to get there, we're not going to focus on doing it by like contracts and locking people in. We're looking at doing it by improving the value that aligns with the mission and the vision that we're here to work on. So
absolutely.
I love that you helped give me a name to it, man. Appreciate it.
Our metric. Yeah, there's actually a cool growth model we can talk about and build off of that. I think there's one important thing we should mention why churn is so important and why this particular North Star metric is an actual predictor of churn. And that's because, and man, I promised myself never to do math in public, but I'm about to, and this is gonna get real bad. But there's a math equation you can actually build to figure out what your theoretical maximum business can ever get to based on your churn. And that's, you can take the number of new clients you get per month and divide that by your churn rate, and that will give you your max members potential. This is for gyms. So, oh God, let's try and do this.
Actually, I there is a way to do it. You know how I do it fast?
How's that?
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT is amazing.
So like ChatGPT is my CFO tool for like quick math. So what's the thing we're looking to do? We'll pull, because I'm interested in how.
Yeah, so let's do this. Let's say you get how many members do you think your gym, an average gym gets per month? New members.
The average large class base probably around 180.
Even though new members, net new. Like I just signed up these people.
How many do they get? Okay. Yeah. Average, man, that depends on the bracket. I would say probably around 20 to 25 new. Okay. New when you consider churn.
Let's just say, well, no, not net, just new. New. So let's say 20.
Okay.
20. And then let's say your churn rate is 10%. So 20, I believe it's 20 divided
200.
20 divided by 0.1 will be 200. So you're capped at 200 because at that number, you're going to gain 10 and lose 10 every month.
Right. Yeah. We at Loudrumor, we talk about it, the plateau point. Yep. So it's the point in which you can't outsell your churn. You either got to sell better or you got to keep better. One of those two have to happen.
Correct. And so if you lower that 10% churn to 5% churn, it's like all of a sudden you're I don't want to do math in public, but instead of a 200 member gym, you're at a 400 member gym or something like that, or 300 member gym. And those 100 members or whatever the differential is literally everything every gym owner wants in terms of like, I need to take home money, I need to pay my coaches more. It's all right there if you can just lower your churn by, down to 4 or 5%.
Well, here's the crazy thing, and this is what I want to dive into. You saying 1%. If you get the churn, let's say the average gym retains for about 10%. Retains 90%, meaning their churn is about 10. That means their average member stays for about 10 months. So if their average member pays $200, average members were $2,000, right? If their churn comes down to 5%, they're keeping people for 20 months. 4% is 25. 1% is 50. Or is that 100 or 50? 2% is 50. 1% is 100. Mm-hmm. So on average, if you can keep people if you have a 1% churn and you maintain that average, you're retaining people on average for 100 months, which is an insane, almost unthinkable lifetime value for a large class-based model. And so I want to know what you figured out. So you said 15 check-ins per month. And it was like an example of one thing, right? Is that kind of, or is there more to it than that to be able to get that churn down to 1?
Well, so the one thing I want to make sure we're clear about is you're not going to be able to get all your members down to 1%. You're not going to be able to get all your members to come 15 times per month, but across all of the PushPress gyms. So we got about 3,000 gyms in our network. We've got hundreds of millions of like data points we've been looking at. We hired some data scientists to help me. Like I had this theory and I brought him in, had him solve this problem. And the only driver that we could find that actually materially changes churn is check-ins. That was it. We had him look at like everything. Did they buy PT? Did they buy products? Did they buy clothing? Did they attend events? Just all of the stuff. Check-ins was the only one that really materially changed the churn rate. And what they found was it was just this really obvious curve where it was like if they came 0 times a month, they were 25% likely to churn, and it goes all the way down to 1-ish%. No matter how far out you go, they're about 1%. But the number crossed at about 15 check-ins. So what it's showing us is like, obvious, super obvious stuff that I really shouldn't be on a podcast explaining, but the more time someone comes to your gym per month, the less likely they are to churn. And when they cross 12, they're at 2%. And when they cross 15, they're at 1%. And then it kind of just flatlines from there.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you build your systems to get, and again, this is across millions of people. So how do you build your system to get 12 to 15 check-ins per month per person, as many people into those buckets as you can?
And when you're saying check-ins, you're really just defining that as you came and worked out.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Came and worked out. Usage is directly tied to churn. Like if things, and I think that's even in your world, right? Like if you're not using the software, you could pretty much already see it coming down the road, right? If they're not logging in, if they're not doing stuff, if they're using the bare minimum stuff on the platform. We look at usage as two things. Number one, the quantity, like how much you're using, like how often you're coming, the frequency, and then the quantity, which is how many things are you using. So are you also getting supplements? Are you also getting retail? Are you also coming to the events outside of just a workout? Like if we're doing certain things, if we can get people to really get a couple products outside of it on a monthly basis, whether it's protein, whether it's, pre-workout or whatever, we can get them engaged with the stuff that combined with working out. That is going to be a massive tell that this is going to be, heading in the right direction when it comes to churn. For your software, and I don't want it to be a promotional thing necessarily, but I'm curious just because I'm genuinely curious. Are you able to measure engagement more than just check-ins, but by also how many things they're like, if they're getting you could say, okay, this person, because not only are they checking in this many times, but they're also getting this much supplements and they're also, referring this many people or anything like that. And we can get a full engagement score on them.
We haven't. And the reason for that is kind of what I explained earlier. I feel like I'm battling this uphill battle right now, trying to explain to gym owners that look, all you have to do is get people to check in, and let me just make this as simple as possible. Like, here is the stats. Right. But in my keynote, I actually have a slide that tells them right now I'm just fishing with dynamite. Like the minute you guys start to fix this, you're going to make me go back to the data and figure out now where's the other pivot points where maybe it's supplementation and PT. Maybe it's, I don't know, they come to an event every quarter. I don't know what it is, but there'll be something that can micro dial that churn better. But for right now, it's hey, let's get from 10 to 5%. Right. Let's just start there.
So you're saying the biggest domino to knock down is the check-ins. And then after that, we have some subsets that can make it improve. Okay. So question to that then, how do you get more people to check in? Is there something that you found other than just calling them and make sure they come to class? There's something that you found that really helps increase that number?
Yeah. So the obvious one is caring, right? And so one of the best gyms on PushPress was this gym in rural Kansas, and I went out and met with him, and I was trying to dig into what he was doing to make his churn rate and his revenue numbers so astronomically in polar opposites of everyone else. And I sat in on a staff meeting with him, and basically what they did is they just handed out printouts of all the members that the coaches needed to call. All the coaches had a roster, made phone calls. And while they're making phone calls, I asked them, because it was very clear they had this culture around come to the gym. And I was like, well, that's great. You call them. And if I'm on the other line, I might be annoyed because you're making me be accountable to something I'm slipping on. This could be annoying to some people. And he's like, well, here's the deal. When they sit down in the sales consult with me, I tell them if they can't commit to me to come 4 times a week, I don't want them to join my gym. And I lay that foundation from the very get-go. And what's the psychological human reaction when someone says hey, Mike, I don't think you're a good fit because I don't know if you can't be committed to meet with me 4 times a week, I don't think you could be my client. You're immediately going to say oh, no, I can come 4 times. We're going to do this. Right. So it's by telling him that, he's not only setting the rules, but he's making them understand this is in my best interest and I have to do it. So when they get the call, they comply. Right.
It's Tony Robbins says the number one human need is significance, and people want to feel like they matter and they want to be approved. Everyone's fighting for approval. And so by actually doing it that way, by saying, hey, if you can't at least do this, which you're minimalizing the work involved, if you can't at least do this, then I can't have you as a client. Now you're tapping into that need where they have to prove themselves because they want to be accepted, and it's minimal effort in the way it was presented. And so you've kind of preconditioned them to just do this
Yeah.
work.
And the real beauty of it too is I've taken a lot of ethical sales and sales types courses because I've always been afraid of being a salesperson. And the thing that resonates in all the courses is like, if you don't want to be a typical salesperson, do the exact opposite. So it's like if you're sitting in a sales transaction, someone's like, I have to qualify to see if like we should work together because I'm genuinely protecting my time and I'm protecting your money. Like what salesperson ever says that? So, it's like it creates this trust, and he's not saying it as BS. Like he means it. Like if you just save your money and go to Anytime Fitness, if you're going to come 2 times a week, just do that.
Have you ever taken martial arts, Dan?
I have long meant to, and I long haven't. I need to.
So I used to teach it, and there's something that I learned is that the majority of people, especially kids, kids and women, the majority of people that join martial arts, they join it for discipline, but also self-defense. They want to be able to protect themselves. And when a person gets in a fight and they know martial arts, they find themselves in a fight, if they don't use martial arts in order to get themselves out of that fight and protected, it's ignorant, right? Because at the end of the day, the person that knows martial arts and the person that doesn't know it, they want the same outcome, like get out of this fight, right? And safely. Well, in sales, the same thing. A lot of people are afraid to use certain techniques in sales because they associate techniques with cheating or something like
Something dishonest. Yeah.
But in reality, unless the intent is not pure, if your intent is to con and you're doing it, then it's different. But if your intent is you really want to help people and you believe this can help them, using techniques in sales, you're still fighting for the same outcome that you want if you didn't know the technique, which is influence the person to make this good decision for themselves. By implementing techniques, all you're doing is getting the same outcome more efficiently and having a better success rate for both you and the client. So I think everyone that sells something good and they decide to only sell it to the right people, they should all learn and use sales techniques because you're just going to get the same desired outcome that you're fighting for, just easier.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, if you don't believe in what you're selling, that's a different story. Like if you're selling something that is a lie or a fraud, that's different. But if you're selling something that actually can help somebody, it's really you're helping them understand how to make the decision in a reasonable way. And you don't need to manipulate them. But at the same time, you have to help them get to a decision that's not going to waste your time or their time, or God forbid, let them walk out the door and not get the help that they need. That's the worst outcome.
Right. And it's more influence and manipulation. I think the only difference between the two is intent, right? Like, I think manipulations when it's self-serving, influencing could be when it's for the other person's benefit, right? You don't want to manipulate your children, but you want to influence them, right?
Yep.
Okay. So really it just comes down to doing what we can to set the precedence early. Like, hey, look, we're going to be working out together. You're going to be coming in here. If you're a member here, we got to at least see you in 4 times. That's one. Then the caring, right? And like we talked about earlier, you want to market to your best customers first. And it stinks to work so hard to get someone and pay for it and sales commissions and ad spend and all that. And then like ignore it to go get the next rabbit. So spend time with that. And then tracking. Honestly, I think tracking is something we should probably talk about as well, because, it's easy to feel like people are coming in often, but the data sometimes tells you a different story. You look at it and you're like, oh, wow, there's a lot. Because you remember the more memorable people, but you don't remember the non-memorable people, and the non-memorable people are the dangerous ones.
This is a whole slide in my keynote, because I'll ask people in the audience, like, how many people do you think you churn? And it's like, 1%, 2%. And I'm like, you're just remembering your favorite clients when they quit, but you're forgetting about all of the people that come in, put one toe in your door, and then leave, just disappear. You never even met them.
Right.
So yeah, totally. Like those are the long tail folks that you're missing and are part of this 10%. So our data shows 8.77% churn. You're saying 10, like industries 10. Like, I'm glad that number's so high. I'm like, this can't be right, but I've had to look at it so many times.
It is.
Yeah,
it is
8%.
That's our data that's our data when they come to us. It's between that 10 to 12 average when they come to us. Our target's always given it to 3 to 6, right? Yeah. And it's like you're saying, it's really just a few small tweaks. And if you get somebody from 10 to 5, they kept members from 10 months now to 20 months. You just doubled the amount of money coming into your business, but you didn't increase the cost to acquire them. So the gap of profit is just so much greater. And the gap of results, right? Because you think about if somebody's with you for 10 months versus 20, what's their life look like?
Yeah. And do they start referring people to your gym, and do they leave good reviews for you? It's like, it's just such a snowball in the opposite direction. When you're chasing rabbits, it's exhausting. It's like a treadmill that will never end,
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Okay. So who is Dan? Like you built out of nowhere, like rock bottom, which I want to know what rock bottom is defined as in your world. You went from rock bottom to $100 million inside of 10 years. And 10 years may sound like a lot or a little, depending on who's listening. To me, it's just about that time. Like I think every 10 years, when you look back at 10 years ago, people are like, it's a whole different version of you. It's a different chapter completely. And you flipped the chapter from rock bottom to 100 million. You didn't have a middle chapter. So
there's a long middle chapter.
The rock bottom is a long chapter, right? So yeah, let's talk about that. How did you what was rock bottom for you? Where were you? And then what was the next thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the type of person to pin things on things, but I was going through a divorce, and probably in my early 30s, right when the home mortgage crisis and the opioid crisis kind of like converged. I lost my house, I lost my family, got introduced to opiates, and went hard down that path. I think now, where I am now, I realize most entrepreneurs and maybe a lot of fitness people in general are pretty obsessive about what we do. So when you do something, you go all the way. And when I discovered opiates, I went pretty deep into that. And then I still need to be functional because I was a computer programmer engineer. So I got into uppers in the day, and I started getting into this whole cycle of like going up in the day, going down in the evening. Then I started drinking myself to sleep at night so I can sleep. Anyways, fast forward about 6 months of doing that, and my whole life was completely wrecked. And it's amazing how fast you can go from like normal person to, in my case, running around a park with a gun in the air thinking that people were trying to kill me. Like that's what happened to me.
That really happened?
Yes. Yeah. Called the cops on the people trying to kill me. They came and arrested me because I was running around with a gun in the park, and parks are protected spaces as they should be. And I got, they found, drugs in my house, and they found gun paraphernalia I shouldn't have had because I started thinking about doomsday scenarios. Like it was just a rough six months. That's all it was. 6 months moment in my life. But I went from being a UCLA educated, white collar computer programmer to 13 years in the same jail that they sent like Crips and Bloods in the middle of California. Like
wait, you were in for 13.
I didn't. No, that's what I was up for. Right. That's what I was up for. So, long story short, this is a long story, but my parents basically had enough of me. I'd been this like spoiled, white collar, middle class kid, always kind of toeing the line of trouble. And they were like, "We're not bailing you out of this one. You're on your own." So I'm sitting in the court holding cell, and there's all these people in there that I'm like, I should not be in a room with these people, let alone like I'm gonna be living with them soon. And not to judge, like I was in there too. I'm not judging, but I've always felt myself to be adaptable. So you put me, if I go to Hawaii for a week, I'll be talking pigeon when I come back. I'm in this room, and they're starting to line people up to get on a bus to go to the jail. And I'm basically in my mind, I'm going like, okay, what do I have to do to survive? Like, do I have to get in some fights? Do I have to kill someone? Like, what do I got to do? Because I'm going to survive. And I went through this whole mental exercise. Like we're lining up, like people are walking on the bus, and I'm convincing myself like, okay, I'm going to figure out how to survive in this thing. I don't have any friends. I'm going to have to find out which gang to roll with, like all this stuff. And then they pulled me out of line and said my mom bailed me out at the last second. But I had mentally like gone the whole way, like imagine playing all that out in your head, and it's like a real thing that's coming. So they pulled me out, and I was like, okay, that's it for me. Like going the straight and narrow the rest of the way. Like this was definitely my last chance. So I got a lenient judge. I got a lawyer. They put me on a drug rehab program. I followed it to the T. I did everything they asked for. I got everything expunged. During this whole time, I started actually building the software because I had like, when you get a felony, no one will hire you. You can't get a place to live. Like there's all these things that happen. And so I'm like, well, I'm just going to write code then. So I started writing code for the software because I had already identified before I fell off this. I'd opened my first gym like during the downfall of my first life. And I was like, I know there's a need here. So I started writing the software. My co-founder like gave me a job at his company that he started like just to pay me to write the software. He's one of the co-founders of the company. And like it was a long, slow bottom out from there, but it was it was a, yeah, it was a tough moment in my life.
Wow. So isn't it interesting? If you can't get a job, start a company and hire people.
Well, I mean, that was the two things. It was like either I keep doing crime or I go do crime. I
Yeah.
go be a trucker or like do some type of like barely making it life, or I start a company. Like those are my three options at that point. You
Right.
know?
I think you chose well. Now you went to 100 million, but you said prior to the 6 month period where you were kind of falling off the rails there. Prior to that, you said you were an engineer. Is that what you said?
Yeah. So I wrote code for a living. So I
Oh,
worked at,
code.
I was working at MySpace when I got laid off and decided to open my first gym.
So how did you go from a guy that was writing code? Well, obviously we know what happened in the middle, but then a guy that could build $100 million company, because a guy that builds $100 million company knows more outside of coding than just the guy sitting down coding. So what were all the things that happened that allowed you to be developed as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, somebody that can work deals and build this?
Yeah. I mean, I think me being an obsessive compulsive has two pros. One is like when I set my mind to something, there's just no amount of walls that won't be run through to get there. So one of the big things I learned building PushPress is like you can run through walls for a certain amount of time, but once you get to a certain point, you can't. So we hit a certain phase where it was like what worked didn't work anymore, and I had to reinvent myself.
You got to break it.
Yeah. But the other thing about being kind of like the personality type I am is like um, there's there's just no quit. Like there's no amount of pain that you can't endure upon yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people will probably resonate with that in different ways. Like I'm going to be the best golfer. I'm going to be the best Olympic weightlifter, whatever it is. It's like you get tuned into it, and that's just what you do.
It's
So
weird, right? You know what's interesting about, because I feel like I relate to that. When I'm having, when I'm in a moment or going through a phase where, I think a lot of people are like, dude, I don't know how you're doing it. Like, cause it's hard. I kind of already know, well, it's just for temporary. I just got to get through it. Like in my mind,
this too shall pass.
it's never that bad. Right. And then on the other side, people are like, dude, you're doing so great, man. And it's never that good either. Like, I'm never like, yeah, I'm never like, yes, we're doing it, guys. It's always
Never
like,
good enough.
good guys, we're doing good. Okay. What's next? What's
Yeah.
next? Right. Like,
There's a stoic. I actually, my buddy just ran a 100-mile race over in Arizona recently, last weekend, and I paced him for one of the laps. And like one of the big things I kept telling him was like, this too shall pass. Like
yeah,
you're feeling great. You're feeling great. Like that peanut butter and jelly sandwich make you feel great. This is going to pass. Like you're going to feel shitty in like an hour,
yeah,
or like my feet are hurting. Well, this is going to pass. Like just everything that you're feeling right now doesn't matter. It's
yeah.
just going to pass. So it's same with business, right? Like, if good or bad, it doesn't matter. It's going to come and go.
It's funny. This too shall. I think the thing that's great about Stoics and most philosophers is they find a way to take something and put it in like a phrase, like a sentence, and it's just badass, and it's all you need to hear.
Yep.
And I remember when I would train clients and I would train people in martial arts and I would train basketball athletes, they'd be in pain, right? They can't even feel their legs anymore. They want to throw up. And what I would tell them in a non-stoic way is, look, dude, it only hurts right now. It's not going to hurt forever. You'll be fine. The reason you want to stop is because if you stop, the pain will go away, which means we're that close to not having pain. So just deal with it. You're fine. We're just right there. And I would say this to them while they're like pushing. But the same thing goes in business. I feel like the same thing. It's like, look, the only reason I feel like quitting at this one small moment is because I know that I'm that close away from being pain-free. So technically, if I'm that close away, why am I even worried about this pain? It's not like I'm in this black hole of pain that I'm in hell forever. Just knowing that there's an out makes it easy to stay in.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, there's just something about pain tolerance. Like the longer you subject yourself to uncomfortable situations, the more uncomfortable becomes comfortable, right?
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a practice.
I think of it as like if you're locked in a car that's hot and it's 120 degrees, but you can get out, you can stay in that car for longer. But if you don't know if you can get out, you start panicking way fucking sooner. So just knowing, just knowing help. We could just get pain free. All right. Awesome. So Well, I do want to understand some of the lessons. So, I mean, going to 100 million, obviously you hear people say like, hey, when you build a company that can do a couple 100,000, that's not the same leader that you have to be to build a company that does a million. And then to go from 1 to 3 and 3 to 10 and 10 to 15, 15 to 30, like you hear all these different levels and everyone's got their own levels, definitions. But what are some of the big lessons along the way you learned that you think about still today?
Yeah.
Even though they may apply differently at different levels.
Yep. I think, well, a lot of the things that have stuck with me, I believe, will transcend most levels. And one of the biggest ones is control your fate, control your own destiny. Don't die. In business and in life, like as long as you don't die, there's another chance. Like there could be a huge windfall at the end of the road. But if for whatever reason you curl up and die today, you can't get to the end of the road to find it. And business is about tailwinds and headwinds, and they come and go. This too shall pass. So it's like if the minute you end, all of the potential future tailwinds are gone. So just stay alive. That is probably one of the most important things for most entrepreneurs, because you're not building Tesla or Uber or something, and you have more of the luxury of time. So that's a super big one. Another one is just always focus on customer value. Like you said it a couple times earlier. If you're obsessive about customer value, it kind of unlocks and solves a lot of the problems that you are going to have down the road. Whereas if you're worried about yourself or how much you're making or how much your company's worth or any of these things, you're playing the wrong shell games that will always create more headwinds. It's just guaranteed to create the headwinds that you don't want to deal with.
Really quick before you get to that next one, how important that is, even to our kids. One of the things we teach them, I got kids as young as 7. My oldest is going to be 17 in a couple weeks, and I got 4 of them. And what my wife and I talk about is we don't want to teach them how to make money. We want to teach them how to create value. If we could teach them how to create value and how to compound on that value and just make it sustain and get better over time for people, the money will follow. But if you just teach them how to make money, that's where you start hopping, and nothing ever kind of sticks. You don't get better at anything because you just keep looking for the next opportunity. Yep. So anyway, I don't want to, stop the flow.
That actually dives into like another big tenet, which is I always prefer to go deep than wide, which, you could say like if you're hopping from one thing to the next, going from crypto to NFTs to AI to all these things, it's like you're going to scratch the surface and never produce any value because the next trend is here and gone, as opposed to going deep all the way, find your customer pain, understand them better than they understand themselves, go deep into that, and just realize like, to create that kind of value, you're going to be on a 10, 20, you're going to be on a long journey, and just buckle up if you're ready for it.
It's funny. You talk about understanding your customer better than they understand themselves. McKenna, which I don't know. Have you had a chance to connect with McKenna? No, probably not. I think you connected with maybe Gina. But she's my director of marketing, and we were talking a lot about, and there's no way you don't think about this a lot in your business, especially building up to 100 million. There's what customers say they want and what they really are saying that they want. They may not even know how to articulate. They may not even know it themselves. Have you seen the new movie that came out? It's about BlackBerry and like the rise and fall of BlackBerry.
Oh no, that sounds interesting though.
Very interesting. Yeah. Very, very interesting. Yeah. And obviously BlackBerry, I don't know if you had one. I had one. I had the Curve, I think, and the Bold. But everybody was saying they love the buttons. That's why people left and went to BlackBerry. They love the full keyboard.
Tactile
because if you remember before that, Dan, to text, you had to hit the number 4 like 4 times to get an L or whatever it was. Like you had to hit, it was just a regular phone pad, and each number represented 3 or 4 letters. And that's how you text. And when you got the BlackBerry, you were able to just text fast, right? And so then Steve Jobs comes and makes a phone with 1 button. And he was totally dismissed it, right? Because he's like, no, everyone says they want the keyboard. They love the keyboard. And so he ignored it. And everyone started leaving to go to see Jobs. What they said was they wanted the keyboard. What they really meant was we want to be able to type better and faster, right? That's it. And if you can get the keyboard on a screen, it's even better, right? So there's what customers say they want and what they like, but then there's what they don't even realize. There's a signal sitting behind that articulation. Is articulated need versus the unarticulated need. And if you can dive into the unarticulated, that's where you start winning, because you create things before they even know they want it. Yeah,
that's huge. You know what that made me realize as you were saying it is what he actually did. they wanted to send emails and texts faster. That's all it was.
Right.
Once it became digital, you could do autocorrect. Like, well, no, actually, you probably could have done autocorrect on a BlackBerry with tactile buttons, but they probably didn't.
Yeah, but what they started doing was, remember, you could drag
The
your
swipe
finger.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it would be a lot more predictive based on, because if you accidentally hit a button on the button,
You had a
I, I
backspace.
yeah, so there were other things along with it, and what you could make that screen do. The phone was able to be smaller. They were able to find a way to create a screen experience. You would never be able to watch YouTube videos on a BlackBerry the way you could on an iPhone, right? So, but the big takeaway for that is, like, they didn't say they wanted buttons on the behind, like, underlying. They said that because what they wanted was this. Um, there's a buddy of mine. He owns I think it's the only natural daycare or preschool here in the Arizona, and everything is like that, right? You've got, when you walk in, awesome security, but it doesn't look like security. It's got pure oxygen pumping into the vents because you realize that people get 37% less sick, right? If there's like oxygen being pumped in, like certain types of oxygen. And then he goes, Mike, look at this. And he opened the door and showed me the backyard. And the backyard, there was I don't know how big it was. You could probably fit 6 cars on it, but it was a garden. And I go, what is that? He goes, a garden. And I go, why do you have a garden? He goes, what we've learned is that when we first meet with kids, more than 70% of them don't like vegetables, but we make them part of the planting process and the nurturing process and the preparing process. We bring that number down to less than 30%. And I go, really? See, what a parent says is, I want my kids to eat healthier, right? What they don't say is, I want them to enjoy all. So they found a way to get what they wanted without just doing what the parents said. Like, well, he likes these vegetables, he likes these. Great, I could just feed him these, or I can get him to really see vegetables differently.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's just interesting. And I think that's one of the things that you're even doing well when you talk about the 15 check. If we could just get people to check in, right? That's an example of, like, we're not thinking about it in that particular way. We're just saying keep them. And when somebody's thinking improve retention, they're thinking of scripts that they can say at the point of cancellation, right? What do I say when someone wants to cancel? Well, dude, why are we here? How do we prevent that in the first? How do we go further back?
Yep. You know? Yeah. I think one of, for the listeners listening, like, the more you can break your business down into inputs and outputs, or drivers and results, like, these things will really help you see your business with more clarity. Because it's like, you want people to stay. It's like, you want your child to like vegetables, but the driver to that is, like, get them to plant them, or get them to like, understand the process of water and sun and fall in love with the process. Then they're going to love vegetables. So same thing, like, you want your customers to stay longer and spend more money. Well, what drives that? What kind of value can you put in front of them to drive that?
I love that, man. So what is the next step for Dan, for PushPress? Like, what are you guys running towards?
Oh, let me rewind this half a step, because this is a good segue. You're talking about the iPhone, and I just heard this podcast that was fascinating. It was one of I forget the guy's name, but he was on the free version of the iPhone. It was made by a different company. They called it the Crystal, and the guy produced the schema, and it was basically the iPhone. It was like a glass display. This is before the internet, so it was like, you can watch movies on it, you could take pictures on it, but there wasn't such thing as email. There wasn't such thing. It was like 1995, right? Okay. And it was supposed to be like, they had car phones. So it's supposed to be like a car phone that just looked super beautiful and could actually play videos and take pictures and this other stuff. And he's like, it was the iPhone, but it was too early. And it was like 10 years before we could have built it, but he understood where it was going. Where PushPress is going is kind of the same. Like, I have a whole vision for where software needs to go. That's going to be so different than what we see today that I probably couldn't really explain it too eloquently and have anyone catch on to it. But the bottom line is, like, as a gym owner, all I want to do is spend my time with my customers. I want to do everything I can to provide value for my customers, be there in front of them, coach them, cue them, help them get the goals that they want. I don't want to be ordering supplements. I don't want to be sitting behind a desk doing member management. I don't want to collect billing. I don't want to do any of that. Accounting. I don't want to do payroll. I don't want to do anything. So it's basically, how do you bundle everything, every relationship, every action, every thing a gym owner has to do, and turn that into a button press in a dashboard somewhere. And leveraging AI, leveraging technology, machine learning, and different algorithms. How do you turn that into a business? And that's kind of where we want to go with PushPress. It'll be something much bigger, but it's also going to take quite a bit of time.
Well, here's why I think you'll be successful. And for everyone listening, there is a takeaway that I hope you caught early on that Dan mentioned. He mentioned that there was a client he had, or a member that he had that's a gym owner in Kansas City that was outperforming others with attrition. And he spent time talking to him to find out what he was doing in order to essentially find a way to help all the other members gain from that knowledge. And spending time with your customers, understanding the customer, is really the most important part of marketing, because what the hell are you going to work on if you don't know who you're working on it for? And if there's anything here that you guys took away, at least the one that I think is the most valuable here, is the fact that you noticed who your best customers were, you found a way to connect with them, you found a way to learn from them, and you're finding ways to improve the North Star in order to help them be as successful as they possibly can be. And I think as long as you keep doing stuff like that, and I can't imagine you wouldn't, this seems to be part of your character. I can't imagine you not blowing up, dude. So this is it's a really fun conversation for me. I appreciate you being on the show. For PushPress, where do we go? Where do we go to learn more from Dan? Where do we go to learn more from PushPress?
We set up kind of a handy dandy page. It's pretty easy. It's pushpress.com/Dan. It's kind of a jump off page for all of the stuff that we might talk about in these types of podcasts, or how you can learn more about everything that we're doing and that I'm putting out there too. So
got it.
Yeah, there we go.
If you guys are listening in the show notes, we'll have his info, his LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. If you're watching the video, we're going to have that up there as well. Dan, thank you so much for joining me on the GSD show today. Wish I had you as a guest sooner, but we'll do another one maybe.
We will. I'm going to start a podcast one of these days, and I'll get you on right up quick.
Dude, I can't wait. Can I be at least episode like 5 or less? That's all I ask.
There we go. Maybe the number 1.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, hey, thanks so much for everybody watching, everybody listening. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.